Okay, I finally did it. I bit the bullet and bought myself an entire U.S. military half shelter pup tent, and I bought the complete thing, both halves, both sets of poles, all of the stakes, all the guy lines, everything. And man, did I get a deal. Both of these halves are in pretty much unused and unissued condition. One's dated 1965 and the other half is dated 2004. The only flaw on both halves is one of the corner grommets of the 1965 half is torn out, but I can easily use a tarp clip and I can fix it and it's going to be good as new. The only drawback of the whole military pup tent setup is if you're humping both halves, it's kind of heavy. It's like 10 or 10 and a half pounds with the stakes and the poles and both halves and everything else. So in the heat down here, I only want to screw around with one half. And I'm gonna concentrate on using the 1965 half. And if you don't have the poles, when you order it on eBay or Amazon, you usually just get the half, the hunk of canvas. You don't get any stakes or any poles or any guy lines or anything. So if you don't have any poles or don't want to cut any poles or don't want to carry any along with you, here's how to set it up using just a ridge line. I like using the ridge lines because I like using ridge lines for my tarp and everything else, and you don't have to screw around with poles or you don't have to cut them. You don't have to do any of that stuff. So the only thing I'm doing here is I'm setting up a ridge line. On the right tree, I have a bowline with a toggle. On the left tree, I'm trying to tie a trucker's hitch, and it was giving me a little bit of difficulty, but I finally got it done. So now we're going to go grab our 1965 half shelter, and we're going to just unfold this half, set it up right along the ridge line with the top right under the ridge line, the part with the double snaps. And you're going to see what we're going to do with the double snaps in a couple of minutes. But just set her right out on the ground. Try not to trip, but just set it out right on the ground and get ready to put this sucker on the ridge line. Now, you see on each side of the half shelter, it's got these heavy canvas loops tied in right at the tent pole grommet. And these things are like double stitched and quadruple stitched. They're not going anywhere. We're going to use them to our advantage. So hopefully you got a couple of pressing knots tied onto your ridge line. So we're going to go to one pressing knot. We're going to pass the pressing knot right through our heavy canvas setup loops. We're going to put one of our handy dandy smooth hardwood toggles from a couple of videos ago right through there. And now we're just going to get that pressing tightened down, and we're going to go to the other side, and we're going to do the same exact thing. We're going to put the pressing loop right through the canvas loop. We're going to use another one of our handy dandy toggles if that sucker will get in there. There we go. And now all you got to do is just tighten this pressing loop up. Now we're going to go to the other side and tighten up the other side, and it pulls it right up. Man, this thing makes it sturdy as anything. So now we got something that looks like this. We got our pressing loop right up here. It's all tightened down on the ridge line. We got our toggle. We got our canvas loop. And now we have our the top of our tent set up. The only problem is it's about 2 inches below the ridge line. There's nothing really supporting the whole top of the half shelter setup all the way over to the other pressing. That's perfectly all right. It'll work just fine like this. This is really, really handy just in case you want to add the second shelter half on it. You don't have to screw with the ridge line. You get plenty of room. But when I set up a tarp, I like setting it up over the ridge line. So we're going to check out how to do that and how to keep the whole top of this half shelter supported. So all we're going to do is loosen up the pressings a little bit, and you see it's got the double snaps on the top in case you want to snap the second half to it. And the snaps are oriented on the same side, so they're hard to snap to each other. So all we're going to do is we're going to put the top of the half shelter over the ridge line, and we're just going to roll the snap over and snap it to the next one so it's rolled over the ridge line. Now we're going to do the right on down. We're going to go to the next one. And we're just going to take this snap. And so you can see it's already over the ridge line. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take this, we're going to roll it 180 degrees and snap it to itself, the next snap, and we're just going to continue right on down the ridge line. Now, you can see that all I'm doing is I'm just rolling the canvas over the top of the ridge line, and I'm just snapping it to the next snap. Now, this is going to make the whole top of the half shelter supported by the ridge line. And I think it's a much, much stronger setup than just 2 prussigs and a couple of toggles into the side loops. Although that's a perfectly a fine way to do it, but I like to have the top of the shelter fully supported. The end ones can be a little bit tough. Now all you got to do is pull the prussig tight, and man, we are cooking with gas now. All right, here's what I'm talking about. After your prussig's tight, here's the toggles, there's the canvas loop. Now, your ridge line is totally enclosed by the top of the half shelter. Look how nice and smooth that is. Man, what a setup. Now, all you got to do is adjust your ridge line to the height you want it, go to the back of the tent, and stake this sucker down, and you got a shelter for the night. I kind of like this method rather than the other toggle method because your ridge line is totally supported by the top of the shelter. Whew, it is hot today. If you're going to play around with a U.S. military half shelter, be sure and find some shade. So that's just a couple of different ways that you can use the half shelter, not the full tent setup, just a half a shelter, and set it up using a ridge line just in case you forgot your poles or you don't feel like cutting any poles. You can easily use it with a ridge line and a couple of those pre-cut nice smooth toggles that I showed you a couple of videos ago. I prefer to wrap the top of the half shelter around the ridge line and snap it to those snaps because it's supported the whole way across that way. But if you just want to use the 2 loops on each end of the half shelter and use a prussig and stick a toggle in those, it'll support it just fine. So stay tuned until next time. I'm going to show you how to turn a half shelter into a wheeling tent using a 5x7 tarp. You're not going to want to miss that one. So until the next time, this is Matt the Old Florida Boy, and I will see you on the trail.